Hi there, everyone. My name is Dominic, and welcome to part 2 of this Q&A session. Now, usually I would have left this at just a one-part kind of video, but as I mentioned in part 1, there's honestly so many good questions that were asked that it felt like a waste not to take a little more time to chat a little more and use some of these questions and not, I just didn't want to let them fall by the wayside when they're such good prompts for discussion. So welcome. This is meant to be a celebration of reaching 5,000 subscribers, but at the time of recording this, I'm pretty sure we either have passed or we're about to pass 6,000 subscribers. So you guys you're moving too fast with the love and appreciation for me to be able to keep up. Not that I'm complaining, obviously. So all right, let's dive right in here. I'm not going to preamble this too much because I want to get through as many questions as I reasonably can in this little audio. So all right, I'm going to hop in here. As always, this is unstructured. I'm just grabbing questions as I see them, and we're going to go from there. So let's see. What's a good first one? Here's a good one. When you first started out, did you ever think your audios would reach a lot of people? At the expense of sounding as sounding arrogant, the answer is yes. I expected they would do pretty well, honestly. And it's a funny thing. I think it stems from a balance that I've tried to strike more effectively as I've gotten older, which is you need to build this awareness where you're like, okay, I am going to give myself credit to be confident in what I am talented at, knowing that I'm talented at it because I took the time to learn. I took the time to improve and get better and commit time that maybe someone else wasn't willing to do. And that's why I'm better at this maybe than someone else, or at least I'm good enough at this, that I can, it's worth sharing, and will probably resonate with people. So on one side, I have always had a decent confidence in my abilities. And I never really tell myself, okay, I'm going to do this, but it probably won't work out. I always kind of try to do it with this mindset that says, no, I'm going to do it. People are going to respond to the work that I'm doing. People are going to respond just purely on account of the fact, if nothing else, that I care about what I'm doing. And no matter what effort it is, whatever creative field it is, that kind of effort should ring through. And I think that's been the case in various fields that I've worked in. And it's on one side, it's funny because it's definitely been something that I've had to actively work on myself as I've gotten older, not to slide into this very egotistical narcissism about some of the success that I've had and the progress I've made in life, and to look at and go, okay, one, this is a product of a lot of other people who have built me up and given me opportunities and opened doors for me, or at least pointed me in the right direction, even though I was, in many cases making the effort to push myself, to pursue things. So this was definitely one of those where I was like, you know what, I'm going to give this a try. Just when I first started making audios, just for fun, I was legitimately just like, this is an interesting field. And when I learned about it and audio role plays as a whole, I was like, okay, this taps into several kind of cross sections of interests and talents that I have, which is, editing, voice acting, obviously, sound mixing. That was something that, especially over the span of COVID, I got more into. I've always been a big film buff. I talk about films all the time in the content that I make and on my socials. And one aspect of it the one area I didn't understand very thoroughly was sound design. Now, over the last few years, that became a big fixture of mine because I understood almost everything else. I understood because it was, it's fields that I understand and have worked in, where it's camera work and cinematography and lighting and color grading and acting and, shot design and all this kind of stuff and film formats and digital versus film. I understand all of that quite thoroughly just because I've been into it since I was like 12 years old. And never really stopped kind of pursuing it in that way. So sound design was something that I hadn't really understood all that well. And when I was, starting to listen to different types of audios and audio role plays just as a listener, it was so interesting to hear the ones that went the extra mile in terms of the sound design, the background environments, and making it really feel like you're in the middle of a really good, like a radio play, And I've had some experience with that. For example, I did a production one time that was basically a live radio play. It was in a theater. It was a theatrical production with a live audience, but all the sound effects were being done live by a pair of Foley artists that we had. So, we're doing, walking sound effects. And the whole point of it was for people to kind of come in and sit down, and the director spoke a little bit in advance of the show and just encouraged everyone to say, hey, we're going to bring the lights down. This is not a theatrical performance in any traditional way. What we want you to do is to sit back and close your eyes and imagine you're kind of back in the golden era of radio, and you're hearing this live, sound experience being produced right in front of you, and then you can open your eyes and you can see the Foley artist getting the props ready to make the sounds and try to time everything just right. So that piqued my interest initially, and then kind of came to fruition making audios, as I've been doing now for a while. But anyway, so yeah, it's may sound egotistical to say, but I really wasn't surprised that what I was doing would get some traction. And my biggest thing, and it's something I've realized because I've been working in the creative fields for most of my life, I've never had a terribly traditional life, is that I just realized it takes a certain amount of tenacity more so than it does talent. And that's a big mistake people make. And I try to explain it to people who are interested in creative work and want to pursue it. And I warn them away from this advice that's very popular. You see it a lot because it gets traction. It makes you feel good, but it's not really the real world advice, which is the whole just go for it. Just drop everything and jump for your dreams. And it's no, you need that energy inside of you to say, I'm going to pursue this, and I'm not going to let someone else tell me what I can and cannot do creatively. I'm going to push through and try to do it because it nourishes me, and that's more important than it being necessarily just lucrative or whatever, or being any sort of get rich quick scheme. But I really try to encourage young artists and say, look, if you have to hold down a day job while you're pursuing something else, if you have to do that, and then you find a turning point where you go, okay, we're kind of on the cusp here where it's getting big enough, my creative work, where I need more time to commit to it. That's when you know. That's when you know, okay, now we're at that stage. It's taking over enough that transitioning into it more full-time might be the time for it, And it's not easy. I mean, I do this a lot, and I still don't make anywhere near enough out of all my creative work I do as a content creator to do it. It doesn't pay me full-time. I still have to have money from other resources, and I still take creative gigs in other fields and have had to budget my money quite carefully. And I've had times making stuff where I've, had rough patches as someone who's self-employed and had to ask for people to help me with some cash and, for the short term. It takes time. So I say that not to be discouraging, but to give you a realistic view in that it is difficult, it does take time, but it can be done. It's a lot of people think of creativity and making it as a matter of you are the one who, you're the sexiest, coolest, most talented genius to come to the field, and that's why you're going to make it. And you have this crazy ego that drives you. And it's really not that. I guarantee you, whatever your dream job is, there is someone far more mediocre than what you could be living your dream right now, who is less talented than either what you already are or what you definitely could be. And the reason why is just because they probably had the tenacity to keep doing it. They had the energy to say, that's fine if it takes 2 or 3 years. It's fine if it takes 5 years. Who cares? Most people waste 20, 30 years at a dead-end job. So if it takes 5 years to break through into a field that you really care about, that's not much of it's not much of a sacrifice in the scope of an entire life. It's difficult, and it takes commitment, and it can be very discouraging. But most of the time, especially because if you're doing that, you're not stagnant. You're going through, and you're spending most of that time creating and improving. So it's that thing of, people talk about a lot where you hear someone be like, oh, and then this overnight success. And it almost never is the case. Right now, my YouTube channel has been obviously getting much more traction with, the series I've been doing right now and some of the other videos. And it's funny to look at, though, because this was exactly what was part of my vision when I started this on YouTube over a year ago. And I'll make an interjection. I am a very scatterbrained person when I talk, so I apologize now. I try to thread it all back together as I speak, but sometimes my tangents go off and sprout other tangents and all that. But it's one piece of advice that I see that's, I think, deceptively simple, but it's true, which is that most people don't get where they want to be because they have no idea where they want to be. They don't actually have a viewpoint. It'll be something generic like, I want to be a star. I want to be a success. I want to be popular. I want to be a filmmaker. And I go, okay, but what does that look like? If I want to be a filmmaker, you go, okay, cool. You're going to get a cheap used camera. You're not going to worry about it being the latest, greatest thing. Or if you can't even afford that, rent a camera. That's fine. Test the waters first. Nothing wrong with that. And you're going to take it out and you're going to shoot things. You're going to take it out and make experimental films and make little fashion movies. And you're just going to go out and drive around and film stuff. I used to do that a lot. You're going to ask your friends to let you take fashion photographs of them. But what you're going to do is when you're doing that, you don't let that be a dead end. You go and you take, your photographs of your friends, and you do fashion shoots with your buddies for free. Everyone just, volunteers their time to be part of it. But then you take it and you go, okay, now I'm going to compare this to some really good work. I will have a viewpoint and not necessarily an end goal, but a direction to go in. So that was always for me was I would, I've mentioned in other places, but if you're not familiar, I've done quite a bit of work as a professional photographer since my late teens, early 20s. And less so now, just 'cause I've been focusing on this more. And after COVID, it just kind of threw a wrench in a lot of the work I had been doing previously, as is the case with a lot of people in many different fields, obviously. But I always would tell myself, okay, here are, first off, what creatively do I like? I would go through and find photographers that I follow, and I would check their websites, and I would just look and go, okay, what draws me to this talent? What draws me to their style? And not being told, 'cause that's the thing too, I weirdly I sometimes feel like I want to discourage people from taking classes on creative fields, especially when they're not technical ones, because getting technical training, like if you take a Photoshop class, I think that's more valuable than taking a photography class. Why is that? Because it's not telling you how to take photographs correctly. It's teaching you a tool that you can plug in alongside your creative work. Versus when you take a photography class, you may get an amazing teacher, but oftentimes in my own experience taking classes, you get a teacher who says, well, this is the right way to do it. This is how it's supposed to be done. And that's almost never true, That's almost always wrong. It's the same reason why I tell people, if you take a class on filmmaking, like a low-level class, I guarantee you they're going to show you a bunch of techniques that no cinematographer is using, that no lighting expert is using in a real film. They're going to go, okay, well, you're going to set up one light on this side of this person's face, and then another light on the other side of their face. It's a fill light, and then a light behind them called a kicker or a hair light. And what they're teaching you is how to set up a talking head interview, And that's good to know, but you don't watch amazing films with beautiful visuals and go, oh, hey, they're using the same lighting setup for every shot, If you watch film shot by Roger Deakins, who, if you're not familiar, just look up Roger Deakins on IMDb, look at his films, and just throw a dart at the board and pick one of his movies. I guarantee you it looks gorgeous. I guarantee the shots are beautiful, they're unusual, they are interesting, they drive the story forward. That's not a niche opinion in the industry and in the field, of filmmaking and being a fan of movies. He's considered probably the greatest or one of the greatest cinematographers of all time. But you hear him talk, and he's so interesting where he talks about how when he's trying to teach people stuff, for example, he worked on How to Train Your Dragon, and he also did a lighting course. I want to say it was at maybe Disney or maybe Pixar. Anyway, he's worked on animation as well, because they wanted to ask him, hey, can you teach us what does this lighting look like? How do we replicate this digitally? And when we're making things in a digital and 3D environment, how do we get that kind of depth of lighting? And he tells a story about going to whatever big animation studio he was working with to help collaborate with them and train their animators in lighting. And he went and he started setting up, and he said they were all in the bleachers of this little theater studio that they have rented out for him. And they're all watching him, and he's doing his setup, and he's rigging up dozens and dozens of lights and this really insanely complex lighting rig. And he's just, firing lights through every corner of the room and all of that with all these complex adjustments. And he talks about internally, he said, he's like, I'm doing this and I'm fucking with them because, it's probably paraphrasing. He's more eloquent than I am, but he says, I'm doing this. And he says, like, I'm intentionally over-lighting, doing this thing that starts to look like an old vintage film set where everything's bright and theatrical. And it's overly lit and over the top. And then he showed them all of this on the camera, and they're all taking notes. And he goes, so this is how I never would light. And then he took the camera and he pans it over, and there was like a stagehand there leaning against just a bare light bulb sitting next to it watching. And he says, like, that right there's an interesting shot. And he says, like, is it because it's a beautiful shot? It's because the lighting's perfect and pristine? No, but it's interesting. And that's the thing. There's a difference between making art that is aesthetically beautiful and making art that is good. These can be two different things. They can be both. But for example, a film doesn't have to have beautiful cinematography. It doesn't have to be lush and gorgeous. It can be gritty and rough and harsh if that makes sense for the story. And that's what it is if you're an artist, especially if you're collaborating on anything. It's about saying, okay, but what's going to fit right? If you're going to do something, you're trying to find you're not trying to seek out doing the same thing every single time you're being creative. You want to vary it up a lot and try to dial in what you're doing. So, anyway, it's a very long roundabout way to say for anyone who is in this field, you need to have a vision for what you're doing and to say, okay, I'm going to compare my work against people who are much more talented than I am. And I'm going to tell myself, what is it about their work that draws me to them, that intrigues me? What parts of that do I want to try to replicate? Do I want to try to experiment with? And somewhere in there, you'll find your own point of view. Again, don't be stressed about plagiarizing or being a copycat initially, especially when we're talking about, you're doing it for free. You're writing things just for yourself, and your friends. You're shooting projects with your buddies, taking fashion shoots with people in your town, Don't be stressed about being a copycat at that point, because you're allowed to be. You're allowed to copy because you're going to learn from doing it, because you're going to do it and you're probably going to fail, but you're going to go, now that I look at it closer, I didn't understand what this lighting difference was here, or how they were using color in an interesting way in this shot. And okay, next time I do it, I'm going to try to introduce that. And now I studied, I looked up articles on how they did it, and now I know more. And you do that back and forth, and I guarantee you will elevate your work very, very quickly. It will be a really rapid upward movement in the quality you're able to bring to whatever field you're doing, because you're setting the bar for people who inspire you, not just people who you're told, oh, this is what good photography should be, like you might in a class where they'll tell you this is what good writing is. You're finding people who inspire you on a personal level, and you're setting them as a goal. I did that for myself, for my photography for a long time, and much to my own shock, after a matter of a few years, I had an opportunity to go to a get-together thrown by one of the photographers who was kind of one of my idols, in the way he shot and the way he styled and edited his photos. And he was throwing this get together, and I got to meet this photographer and several other people who were there who he had invited, who I had been following for years, and had become, I became Facebook, acquaintances with some of these people. And it's a funny thing, because it was a really nice feeling to go, hey, I'm here because I didn't tell myself that I couldn't be. I didn't tell myself, well, I'll probably never make it. I'll probably never get here. I always gave myself the dignity of saying, well, why shouldn't I be though? If I work hard enough and I really want to be better, I want to learn, and I have a passion for improving and trying and experimenting, and I'm willing to give it time, which most people are not. Most people will give it way too brief of a window in their life, and then they go, I just couldn't make any progress. I dropped everything that I had, and I moved out to LA to be a model or an actor, and I was there for 5 months, and it just didn't happen. And I go, you can't do that. Yeah, your art and your work as an artist is a lifelong pursuit. You know what I mean? It's something that is part of you. It doesn't disappear. And if it feels like you can disappear it, or you can give up that creative part of yourself so easily, then maybe you need to reevaluate if it's really a passion of yours. I don't say that to be harsh or to be discouraging, but to say that, it should be something that goes, okay, I'm going to keep doing this no matter what. Like, that's for me, whether it's, financial, it's a lucrative financial thing or not, I'm always going to be creating in some capacity throughout my whole life. I have no doubts about that whatsoever, because I have to. I feel so terrible and stagnant, and I never feel more anxious or more stressed or more worn down with myself than when I'm not creating, than when I'm telling myself, you know what, I should just give myself a break. And the problem is I say that as an excuse to not try and motivate myself to keep creating. Because of course I could do both. You can keep creating and still be giving yourself breaks. You can scale it down to say, I'm only going to create for a little while today, because that's all I can manage, and be okay with that. So anyway, just all that to say, the short answer from the original question, yes, I'm not really surprised that what I've done has started to receive some traction, because I always kind of knew it will, or I always kind of knew it would. Sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied talking at such length, because I envisioned myself, and I would just tell myself, and it's not, so I see it made into this like pseudo-spiritual manifestation idea of putting it out in the universe will give it back to me. And again, if that's your point of view, that's perfectly fine. I think that's bullshit, because I think it robs you of the pride you deserve to feel for achieving for yourself and with the help of others, to realize my decisions brought me here. I made an active decision not to shoot myself in the foot and constantly drown myself in self-pity and self-loathing and degrading my own creativity, and instead give myself the freedom to say, you know what, it's okay if I'm bad at this. I'm allowed to be bad at art for a very long time. I'm allowed to be bad at this for months while I'm learning. I'm allowed to go shoot a short film and to have a blast doing it, and for the final result, you know, to look back on it 6 months later and go, oh my God, what a mess, you know? Oh my God, there's so much wrong and I didn't know yet. And that's a good thing, you know? That means you made progress. You look back on it and go, man, there's so much I would change now. But that's because I learned. That's because I made something and didn't cut myself off before even trying. Because that's the only way you can guarantee you'll never get anywhere, is just by throwing in the towel. Just by saying, you know what? It's probably not going to work out anyway, so why give a shit? And I can tell you, if you do it and you give it enough time, and you're willing to commit the time to build your skill while not building a shitty ego about it, because people don't want that. People will not work with that. They might work with you once if you're brilliantly talented but kind of an asshole, but they're probably not going to work with you again, because why would they? There's plenty of talent in the world, but if you have talent and you have a personality and there's passion bursting through, that's what brings you back. That's the thing that's gotten me rehired on a variety of projects. I have some film work that I'm doing in the next month for a couple different projects. And the only reason why these came around to me to shoot these projects is because the person putting them together reached out to me and was just very candidly was like, look, I just like working with you. I think you're very talented, but I also just legitimately like working with you. I like that the passion that you bring to the project is a huge addition to the experience. It helps me feel at ease that things are going to things are going to work here because, you know, you're bringing ideas. And that's what I always try to, express to whoever I'm working with. It's like, look, I'm here to give as many good ideas as I can. And if you have a better idea, we're going to take the best one. I don't want my idea to win because of my ego. I want to give as many ideas as I can. So between the group effort of everyone contributing good concepts and their best work, we come out with something that is cumulatively better than it could have been by anyone individually. So again, have faith in yourself. I guarantee you, whatever thing you want to pursue, there's a field for it. And don't let anyone tell you it's not realistic or you need to think about a real career, because it's fucking bullshit. The amount of people that I know and the amount of stories that I see where someone works a corporate job to climb the corporate ladder for 20 fucking years, and right before their retirement, they get cut loose and they have no other skill set, they're set adrift, and they absolutely nosedive. So I always tell people, what would you rather do? Would you rather be struggling but know that you're fighting to make something that is meaningful to you, or to have less struggle but a life that is devoid of any sort of artistic passion in you? Because I know what I've been struggling for almost 10 years now, and I look back and it's led me to some really difficult points in my life that I really had to push through mentally, and to try to be vulnerable and honest with myself about the toll things were taking. But the end result of it is, because I didn't buckle to it by becoming bitter about it, I tried to use those experiences in life as a growing opportunity for me to try to learn more about myself, try to be kinder to myself, and to say, you know what, it's okay if I'm not quite where I want to be yet. Because the point is just to keep trying. Just me existing, creating things is enough. And if it gets validated down the road with success or attention or money, that's great. That's awesome. But I'm going to keep creating right now because I want to. That was something, even mentioning kind of, the vision you have to have. When I started doing my work on YouTube and started making more content, I intentionally told myself, I am going to make a lot of stuff right now that is probably not going to get a whole lot of attention. It's going to be for a very small amount of people who were supporting me early on, and I'm very thankful to them, because that's one thing. It's very helpful if you're not getting a lot of views or traction to go, okay, but you know what? I may not have a ton of people seeing what I'm making, but there's 10 people, there's 15 people, there's 20 people who are consistently commenting and chatting and are interested in what I'm making. That alone is a huge encouragement. That's a huge inspiration to go, you know what? Hey, but there are real life people, real humans here who legitimately want to know what's next and what I'm going to make and what I have to say and want to chat about it. And that's really inspiring. So I told myself, I was like, okay, I'm going to focus on staying positive and say, you know what, even if it is just for this small core group of supporters for a while, that's fine. I'm going to learn to be content with that and to value that as something very cool and very special and meaningful, and to know that there's plenty of time for things to be a success and to grow as things go on. But I also I sincerely did not want any of my work to quote unquote kind of go viral or be a big hit until I'd made quite a few videos and quite a few audios. And the reason for that is because you can get in a trap where, especially in the kind of internet age that we're in, where if you make a video that sends you kind of goes to the moon right away, it's this massive runaway hit, and it's really early on in what you're making, you're going to feel a lot of pressure to go, okay, I guess I just make that now. Because the problem is you haven't built a platform based on you as a person. You're building a platform based on one specific video or one specific piece of content that you've made. And people will expect it to be just more of that, and they're not being tied to you. So I'll see this in because I'm in a few YouTuber subreddits just to get advice and just to be able to see what other people's struggles are, and just kind of helps give me some perspective and a sense of community with other people who are creating, even if I don't know them personally, just to see what people are posting about. And I see this a lot where I see people be like, my channel's dying, I don't know what the fuck is happening, I'm desperately posting more content and it doesn't work anymore. And almost inevitably you'll delve into it and it'll be like, well, I had one gaming video with no commentary on it that was a huge, I was comparing this game versus another game, and that was a huge hit. And people will be honest with them and they'll say, yeah, but you didn't people didn't show up and watch that because they were interested in you personally, frankly. They were interested in the content. And then as soon as that trend died out, because you didn't make it your perspective on it, people had no reason to stick around, versus that's something that I've always appreciated, is that I've made it very clear, that I'm like, okay, my content's going to change over time, but I think that's okay. And I think when you bring a creative and passionate personality and point of view to what you make, people respond to that. I think down the road about, ideas I have for wanting to work on short films for the channel, if I had the resources to do so, a little ways down the road, and to make more complex kind of audio role plays that would be more time consuming and be more difficult. And I probably wouldn't be able to do them that frequently, but would be a cool artistic idea, or even making a little mini series project of some kind. You know what I mean? Just branching out and not limiting myself to saying, well, this is the only thing I make. Because I think what you will find is if you put your passion into what you're doing, people will respond to that. They're responding to that oftentimes more than the work itself. And that's what I told myself. I said, okay, when inevitably some of my videos start to hit higher than others, like this Mafia series I've been doing has been doing really well, and I'm really happy. I really like this series. Legitimately, I'm having a really fun time creating, and creating it as an audio creator. It's the scripts I did not write, to be clear, to give credit where credit's due. They're written by on Reddit, they go by it's Esme Jones, very, very talented writer. And I'm having a blast with those, but I just told myself from the very start to go, okay, when I have something that kind of starts to pop off and get more attention and gets more views, I want people to be able to do that and then have confidence to want to stick around. Because if you do that, if you just are recently showing up here, hopefully what you went through is you go, okay, I just clicked on this one video that the algorithm kind of fed to me, and showed me, and I liked it. And then I went to the channel, and then I clicked on a few other things, and there was a lot of good work there. Clicked on other audio role plays, and they were of similar quality, whether they had a lot of views or not. And I checked out the gaming videos, and he clearly really likes doing those too. And you want to build a sense that you really care about what you're doing, so that way people go, I'm going to stick around, because whatever this person is going to make in the future, they're probably going to do it because they want to do it. They're going to do it because it interests them, and it's something that kind of inspires their creativity. So anyway, that's a super long first answer. I wanted to get through a lot of questions, so I can ramble forever. So let me pick another question in a second here. But just to say, yeah, don't shortchange yourself on your own creativity. I definitely did believe that I could make it in this field just because that's how it's been. I've already done it, frankly, in a lot of other fields. I wanted to do work as a photographer, and at the age of 21, I was employed as a photographer. And I shot my first campaign for a brand that premiered in Vegas when I was like 22, 23, I forget. It was right within a few years of that, and then I wanted to work on projects doing cinematography, and I've had opportunities for that show up here and there. So it's just something I told myself, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to give myself the freedom to say, you know what? I don't have to, none of these things have to be a massive runaway hit right now, but I'm always going to keep myself open to these artistic, passions that I have and pursuing them, and give myself as much time as it takes to be able to have opportunities open up for them. And they consistently have the more I've done that. So anyway, just to say, if you're creative and you're worried about, having a lot of self-doubt and all that, give yourself the credit to think that, exchange some of that doubt for some vision of yourself in the role you want. Whatever that is. If you're an actor saying, okay, I envision myself getting that first big role because I went to 100 auditions where someone else was only willing to do 20 auditions, then they quit. But I was going to do 100 or 200 before something opened up. And then that sort of snowball effect starts to happen in progress. And, whatever your personal passions are, that applies, I think, no matter what, across the board. So, all right, anyway, let's go ahead and move on a little bit. What's another good one? Are you a book fan? Do you have any favorites or recommendations? I am a book fan. I don't get a chance to read as much as I would like. That's one habit I'm trying to change, honestly, about my kind of day-to-day and weekly routine, is making more time to read again. Because I was that kid growing up who would be reading an entire book in a single sitting in one day. And then, you go to do some college education, and I forget seeing the statistic on it. It was something crazy. Like, most people who graduate college, some crazy amount, like 40% of them never fully read a book ever again, like at least the ones that were surveyed. And it's just because I think that's a reflection of the fact that most education is about regurgitating information, so they make reading a chore. It's not about reading something and sharing your insights from it and your thoughts on it. It's about reciting statistical facts and pieces of whatever you read, which is not really what reading is about. It's about how it nestles into you personally and into your mind, and what it makes you, whether you like it or dislike it, it's about how you feel about it, what it is, kind of brought out of you creatively and in your imagination. So I can recommend a few books, though. Not necessarily any of these are like top favorites of all time, but definitely ones that I would recommend. And some of these are going to be affected by sort of the recency bias of me having read them recently. The first one I'd say, because the last 6 months have been, I've been dealing with a lot of mental health struggles. I started having panic attacks for the first time in my life, and it became very debilitating, very crippling, to the point where I was having trouble doing simple errands, driving to the store or doing simple things without having panic attacks. Being functional, even going into a shop for a little bit or going in to pick up a coffee or something, was getting to the point where I was getting absolutely deliriously panicked over it. And this was through a combination of several stressful factors in life that all combined into kind of my nervous system was just shot for a bit there, which is what, happens. People, a lot of them try to find the source of these things. And almost always, regardless of what the trauma or stress or challenge is that led to that feeling, whether it was a slow build up or not, it's almost always a matter of your nervous system being kind of shot through, and then your mind follows with a lot of fear. So that to say, I'm going to recommend a book that has, because I was like, okay, I don't want to be content with being like, okay, I guess I'm just scared now. I was like, you know what? No, I need to find myself the tools, because for a little while I tried to just muscle through and just tell myself, you know what, I'm going to be fine. I just got to give myself, I got to snap out of it. This is silly. It doesn't make any sense. And that starts an interesting cycle of shame when you have anxiousness and anxiety and panic, because you tell yourself, when the panic is there, it's terrifying and it's very real and very visceral and it's very bodily and physical. But then the rest of the time, you often beat yourself up by going, how fucking silly was that? You were just in a movie. You were just at a store. You were just having a conversation with someone. Why the fuck were you panicked? Oh my God, how weak are you? And you get in this boxing match where your subconscious nervous system is winding up and beating the hell out of you with adrenaline and stress and panic response. And then your brain, after surviving those things, is beating you up too by being embarrassed or ashamed over it or saying that it's something silly. So the main book that I read that helped me so much, and I've made so much progress over the last few months, making just huge strides, is it's a book by a doctor called Dr. Claire Weekes, who was an Australian practitioner who was born in the turn of the century. She was born like 1903, and she lived to be like 87 or something, and was doing this for a huge amount of her life, studying anxiety and panic and clinically helping people. But she has a book called Hope and Help for Your Nerves. Single-handedly the best resource that I've ever read. Like, legitimately, I don't know. I think it's maybe presumptuous to say that I feel cured in that I still struggle with anxious feelings. But I mean, since reading that book, I've had nothing that I would clarify, or I should say I would qualify as a panic attack. And by that, I mean, the lessons that it taught me in there were so fucking helpful, and they were so practical. That's the thing. It is not a highly clinical book. It's not a book meant, because some books you read and you feel like the person reading it, they want you to know how smart they are. And they might be brilliant, but they're not communicating in a pragmatic way that's meant to help you now. And her book is so the opposite. It is so clearly the work of someone who spent a lifetime doing her best to help people. Back in a time, and this book was written in, I think, 1960, back in a time when mental health had barely even had a field, it was barely even developed, especially for things like anxiety. It was, things were being studied for people who had schizophrenia or had these very severe mental illnesses. But things like anxiousness, she talks in the book a lot about how most people, and it still applies to now, would carry this energy of like, okay, well, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, just get over it. And she talks in a very compassionate way about how you can both be kind to yourself and give yourself these guidelines to make progress and improve yourself, while also never succumbing to self-pity over it, to never feel like I am the victim of this panic. And I'll share a little bit just because this concept alone helped me a lot. And if you don't have a chance to read it as soon as possible, maybe this little bit will help you if you're someone who struggles with anxiousness or especially panic like I did, because I was dealing with brutal panic attacks. And the problem was every time I had a panic attack somewhere new, when I returned to that place, when I would drive through a certain intersection or whatever, my brain would go, oh, hey, this is the place where you got scared before. This is the place where you panicked before. All right. Good luck, basically. And I got myself into this loop of just being fucking terrified. And then I'd be scared of, I would try to exercise, but that would bring my heart rate up. And I'd be like, oh my God, oh my God, now that's making me panic, because that feels like what it feels like to have a panic attack. I mean, it got to the point where I was playing video games to try to relax. And I was playing, Elden Ring or Souls games, and the boss fights were getting intense. And I would feel my heart racing, and that would trigger spikes of adrenaline and fear. So just to say, if it helped me, I guarantee it could help you. My symptoms were so severe. I was basically agoraphobic. I was having trouble even when I was just at my own house, not being terrified and not having panic attacks. So I was waking up most nights in the middle of the night, terrified, calling people, just desperately asking for help, for someone to listen, and sometimes taking an hour or two before I felt fully settled down. So anyway, just to say that the book has a lot of really good work. So do not take my summary of it here as enough. Please go find a copy of it. Please read it. It's not a hard read. It's not a very long book. It's exceptionally thoughtful. It's very, very clear. And what I love about it is it spends very little time talking about what led you to the point of stress or anxiety that you're at right now, which I think is really vital. I think you can get really in this circle of being like, okay, you're in therapy, and maybe some of us, maybe have a therapist who's like, all right, well, we got to dig into your childhood trauma. And here's the thing. There is room for that, obviously. There is room for self-improvement and making peace with a difficult past and challenges you've gone through. But I truly believe it can be really counterproductive to start anywhere near there. To not go, okay, the point is you're struggling right now, and you need tools to help you right now. You can't, I'm in the midst presently of switching to a different therapist, because the therapist I've been working with for a number of months, I was very frank with him recently and said, look, you have not given me any techniques that have helped me. I don't believe it's because you're a bad person. I don't believe because I just don't think you're equipped for what I've been struggling with, because it was a lot of being told, well, we're gonna fix this in the next 6 months, we're gonna make some progress. And that's so debilitating to go, okay, well, we didn't cover anything this session. Next session, you're gonna help me, right? And hearing things like, okay, well, we're gonna do mindfulness and breathing exercises. And the problem is, I find with a lot of solutions you read and a lot of kind of surface level help that you're being told about dealing with panic is we got to calm down. But the problem with that is it validates the fear that you have as legitimate. Like you got to be able to, if you can't control this, it's going to control you. And the problem is when you push it down, you're fighting your subconscious nervous system. It doesn't know better. It's trying to keep you safe. It thinks you're actually in real mortal peril. So when you try to push it down and try to desperately tamp that feeling down, it responds usually with more panic. It usually responds with more fear because it feels like you're pushing back against it and you're giving it conflict. So I was just going to say one lesson in the book that is a phrasing that Dr. Claire Weeks writes about that I thought it just clarified how I felt about it so clearly, which she said, and I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but she said, you need to learn to divide your panic fear. And she talks about it, she refers to it as nervous illness in the book. She doesn't call it panic or anxiety most of the time, specifically because she talks about, she's like, I need you to treat this as a real illness, not as this imaginary thing or whatever. She's like, we're going to treat it just like you would a broken leg that you need a splint to heal. You need guidance to help you get there, but absolutely it will heal. You just need to know how to do it without, causing more damage. Just if you had a broken leg and you push yourself, it's going to stay hurt for longer, possibly forever. But if you just have a really good doctor who says, here's the exact game plan, here's exactly what you need to do, and we don't know exactly when it'll heal, but if you follow these steps, it will heal. It has to. Your body wants it to heal. And she talks about that a lot, about how your system wants to get better. It just doesn't know. It just is feeling all of this confusion over the fear, and it's being validated by your mental response. So she talks about the way to distinguish it mentally is splitting it into what she calls first fear and second fear, if I'm not remembering incorrectly. And the basic idea of it is first fear is your subconscious. It is your nervous system. It's that feeling when you go to a new place and you get freaked out and you feel that cold flash, like an electric charge down your spine. That horrible, horrible fucking feeling. I say as someone who has had it dozens upon dozens of times, sometimes multiple times in a day. Just a horrible, horrible feeling of panic. And she said, and then there's second fear. And second fear is your brain feeling all of that rush, and your brain goes, we're about to die. Something is, oh my fucking God. Holy shit, our heart is going to explode. Oh, I'm going to have a heart attack. My hands are going numb. I'm going to pass out. I'm going to crack my head on the pavement, and that's going to be it. Someone else is going to see this and no one's going to help me. Like it's that absolute just storm of mental tension and panic that swirls around. And what she talks about is, she said, most people think these are the same thing. They think of these things as a unified system, but they're not. Because, she said, that flash of adrenaline, when you're really sensitized, that's what she talks about. She calls it a sensitized nervous system. It's just overly sensitized. It's overly responsive. And she talks about, to someone who's really sensitized by stress and anxiousness and being nervous so often, even them, you're bumping into something in the dark in your house, that you're not ready for. It can be enough of a jolt in your heart rate to be a flash of panic. You're too sensitive because your nervous system has often gone through a huge amount of ongoing stress and weight and difficulty. And this is the result of it. It's just fried some nerve endings. But she talks about how it's very easy to feel like those are synonymous. You feel the flash through your spine and your mind is terrified. And she says the problem is, what people mostly try to do is they try desperately to stop the physical sensations while not addressing the mental ones. They let the fear just absolutely run rampant, just rippling through their mind, imagining every awful scenario and not able to try to bring any logic to it, which is not easy. It takes time and practice to do this. But she said they sit there and they'll do deep breathing exercises. But she said you're trying to control something that you have no control over. It's a part of your animal brain that was designed to keep you safe, from a lion hunting you down. That's your adrenaline nervous system. It's called your sympathetic nervous system. And the alternative of it that calms you is your parasympathetic. For example, a good reason why people, when you do really deep breaths, a lot of times that actually can make the feelings more intense, because your sympathetic and your parasympathetic are always active. Your body's always releasing a little bit of an energy boost to increase your heart rate and then releasing it back and forth. It's this kind of ebb and flow that happens every single minute of your life. It's perfectly normal, but it can get out of balance. For example, when you breathe in, that activates your sympathetic nervous system. It brings your heart rate up when you breathe in, pretty much every time. When you breathe out, you're engaging your parasympathetic nervous system. This is the reason why what you can do, like for example, if you're just feeling a little bit of nervousness, you're not at a full point of panic, you just want to kind of have an overall calming effect to signal to your body that it's going to be okay. The reason why you want to do a breathing pattern is to minimize your sympathetic system and to engage your parasympathetic. By that, I mean a very common meditative breathing technique is to breathe in for 4 seconds, to hold for 4 seconds, and then breathe out for 8 seconds. Why? Because you're shortening the time that your sympathetic nervous system is being engaged. You're breathing in for 4 seconds, but you're breathing out for twice as long. So you're giving your body a little bit of rush with the breath in, but you're giving it twice as long of release. And your body on a base nervous system level responds to that. But she talks a lot about how when you separate those two things in your mind, you learn to gain much more command and you learn to lose the fear of the fear itself. Because she talks about, you start to learn internally the logic of saying, okay, I'm not going to die though, even though it feels terrible. And I'm not denying myself the fact that it doesn't feel comfortable. I'm not here to saying, it's all good, I'm fine, it's all good, You're not lying to yourself. You're going to say, this is uncomfortable. The discomfort is very unpleasant, but it's not dangerous. My discomfort is not a threat to me. She talks about it too. She said, too often our brains are imaginative in a way that our nervous systems are very limited. For example, your nervous system, your heart's not going to explode. At what point would it be if your system fired adrenaline from our ancient ancestors because a cheetah was after them and the adrenaline fired through and it caused their heart to stop and explode or whatever? It's not going to happen. The system can't. It's meant to keep you alive. It's just being misused because your nervous system is overly sensitized and doesn't know what the real dangers are and what they're not at this point. That's what it needs to relearn and recalibrate. So what you do that helps is when you feel that flash of adrenaline, her recommendation that I've used a lot is rather than, and I see so much bad advice, at least to me. For example, things like you got to go rinse off in a cold shower, you got to hold ice in your hands, you got to do an ice bath and put your head below water because that'll snap you out of it. And the problem is you're not making peace with the discomfort and softening your system, because the problem is you do that and then you're basically just knocking your nervous system around until it stops. And you're not actually telling your nervous system, hey, it's fine. You're not short-circuiting those wrong messages. So what she says is, for example, you're reading your morning paper or whatever, and you feel that flash and all that, and you immediately feel like I gotta move. I need to go for a walk. I need to get out of the house. The walls are closing in. And she said the hardest thing to do, but the most helpful, is to do the opposite. You slump in your chair like your arms and your legs are made of lead. You just weigh yourself down like you are an absolute statue that will not move. And what this does, and it's, again, mentally, it's very scary. It does take time. I will not pretend it's easy, but it has made my life immensely better, and I've made huge progress with this, is when you do it, you're confusing the signals because your body fires the adrenaline and it expects you to run from it, to be able to say, okay, something's wrong, you gotta go. And then when you don't, it doesn't keep releasing adrenaline because it doesn't have a reason to, because the subconscious system is this very binary back and forth, switch on, switch off kind of thing. And it kind of is there going, okay, we fired this response because I thought something was wrong, but they're not moving. They didn't get up and run off. There must not be something really that dangerous then. There's no point firing more adrenaline. They're not even moving. They didn't even get up from their chair. And she said it's very uncomfortable to sit there with your heart thumping in your chest, refusing to move. But what it does is over time, the next time it happens, your nervous system is going to fire a little bit less of adrenaline. It's going to fire a little less because it's not so sure now if there's actually a danger there or if maybe it is confused. And it's going to fire a little less. And you're going to do the same thing. You're going to carry on with your day. And you're going to mentally just keep checking through yourself and say, you know what? I'm going to move through this. She calls it, technique-wise, she calls it floating, where she said, don't feel like you're carrying yourself by force. Feel like it's like a cloud wrapped around you or like you're floating on a calm, pool of water. The idea that you're going about your day with this floating thing moving you along. It's picking up the weight that you feel pushing down on you with these anxious feelings, and it's carrying you along. It's not on your own shoulders for the moment. So the book deals with a lot more than that. I'm ranting about it because it's made such a huge impact in my own life. So it's the reason I could talk about it at such length. And it deals with so much more. I mean, the amount of times that I read the book, and it would literally bring me to tears because I'd read it and go, I thought this symptom or this feeling or this crazy thought in my head was exclusive to me. I thought it was going absolutely insane. I thought my brain was breaking and I thought it was going to ruin everything I have in my life. And this doctor from 60 years ago, writes a section on it that is so damn hyper specific that I go, oh shit, well, I must not be that unique of a case because this doctor wrote about this, decades before I was even born. And it's to a T what I'm going through. And it's so comforting. And the book is very encouraging. It is a book that never talks down to you. It talks compassionately to you like you would want from any physician healing you from a physical injury, where they're going to say, hey, there's a tough road ahead. The recovery process we're going to have to stretch these muscles to get them back where they need to be because they're atrophied. But you're going to make it. You're going to be stronger and you're going to be better off than before, and you're going to know how to keep yourself healthy. And that's the thing that she talks about in the book that really just was a huge weight off my chest from, a feeling of being just never being able to be at ease from the moment I woke up for weeks on end. She says, with the techniques you were learning here, the reason why they're so effective, the reason why you will be in the end a better, stronger person for the rest of your life is because you're taking a cure with you. You're taking a cure and an answer to this, that no matter where you are, it doesn't matter. You don't have to pretend you're in a safe zone at home or in your town or in this little bubble of existence. You don't need to narrow your field of view and how you live your life because the cure is in you now. It's with you. It's going to carry you forward. And if you go somewhere that's a huge new stimulation and maybe that sets your nervous system a little bit nervous, now, unlike before, you're not going to feel like, oh my God, this is what I get for branching out. You're going to go, you know what? I've done it. I've done it before. I did it 100 times before. I can do it 100 times again and I will be fine. It's not necessarily going to be fun. It's not going to be comfortable. It's not going to be something I would want to do again, but it's going to be okay. And the next time it happens, the next time I go outside my comfort zone, it's going to be a little bit easier. You're training these muscles just like you would in fitness and physical health to say it's going to be that muscle of response and non-reactivity is going to strengthen with time. And since then, I went from weeks before a vacation that I had planned, that I had been thrilled for. I had booked like a year ago. I was leading up to it, to the vacation, and I would wake up sometimes just sweating and my heart pounding, and I would sometimes just be in tears, just tell myself, I can't do it. I can't fucking do a vacation. And I've traveled all over in places all over the country before, and never had a problem prior to this part of my life. So I was just like, I just can't do it anymore. I'm too weak now. I'm too busted up. I can't be that person. I can't do the flight. I'm not gonna be able to manage it. And I just told myself from that point, I had several weeks before the trip and I read the book all the way through. I reread parts of it and I kept it like a little Bible that I would just go back to sections that had really good passages and highlighted them. And I just said, you know what? I'm not saying no. I'm not letting myself, because if I don't go on this trip, then I'm telling that silly animalistic part of my nervous system that just doesn't know better, that is just trying to keep me alive but is just confused, that something was wrong. Versus if I go on that trip and I come back home, I'm going to feel a lot better. And sure enough, I even had some medication that the doctor had given me that was specifically like a beta blocker to bring your heart rate down. And I was going to take it more for the flight. And to be clear, this is one of those things, this worked for me. If she talks in the book a lot, which I love about it, is she says, if you need to take medication that's going to help you through this period of time to stabilize you while you work on this stuff as well, there's nothing wrong with that. Versus a lot of modern books have a very divisive point of view where most of them are aggressively anti-medication for any reason, and they treat it like you're going to be an addict. And she talks about in the book, and it's funny, this is a doctor writing 60 years ago about a thing that's still a problem today because of misinformation, where she talks about, you have a doctor trying to help their patient with some sort of sedative to be able to just to ease their nervous system down enough for them to be able to think clearly, to be able to make a game plan, to be able to move out of constant panic. And she said, she was like, she's like, in my whole practice helping people, she's like, I never see clients really who, when they have healed and they've made progress and they feel great again, they're desperate to stay on their medication. She said she's like, almost every time when they've made all this progress and they've had success and they've changed all these lifestyle things and they use the medication as a jumping off point to get their life back to where they want to be or even better, she's like, that's usually the time when the people go, great, I can't wait, now I can let this go. This was a guiding force that helped me get to where I am, and now I can release it because it was just part of the toolkit to bring me to this sort of mental success that I've reached. So again, it's even like that. I appreciate that she writes in a very thoughtful way about saying, hey, like she even says, she's like, look, if you're probably so fatigued from the wear and tear of your stress and anxiousness. So if you need to ask the doctor for something to help you sleep, she talks about it too. She's like, at the beginning of this process, she's like, don't think about pushing yourself. Like, you're not going out every day to try to face your panic and try to get through it, She's like, she talks about, she's like, you sleep, take a sedative, make sure the doctor has recommended you something safe and easy to use. She says to be very cautious and listen to your, listen to a medical professional. But she said, find a good sedative and a good dosage that's healthy and safe for you. And she said, take that, sleep a full night, get up, and go have a really good breakfast, have a lot of water, have a good little morning moment out, go on your porch or whatever, listen to the birds, listen to, feel the sunlight, and then go take, under your doctor's supervision, go take another sedative and sleep the rest of the day away. Because she talks about, she's like, you can't begin to try to parse out the first fear, second fear, and try to split these things up and make this progress if your mind is so fatigued, just the way you couldn't fight a battle, if you're a soldier, if you've already been marching for a week straight. It's just not possible. Your body can't physically do it. But if you just give yourself the dignity to say, I'm not going to fight anymore in that way. I'm going to move with what I'm feeling. I'm going to go ahead and flow with it. I'm going to float through what I'm feeling. And I'm going to give myself rest. I'm going to give myself every chance I have. And slowly my nervous system is going to bring balance back. It's going to learn what real fear and fake fear is and not be so reactive to every stimulation. So anyway, I know this was just supposed to be a book recommend, but I know how many people struggle with this. I also know, frankly, how many people who listen to my audios and the work I do have shared about struggling sometimes very heavily with mental health. So I always think, it might be 30 minutes on a Q&A audio that maybe was supposed to be more lighthearted and fun, but if me saying this is of any help, then I'm glad that I took the time to do so. So yeah, that book's amazing. I'm trying to think of some others. That's, again, most of what I've been reading has been a lot of self-help kind of work. Some other books, though, I could definitely recommend that I think are really good that I won't delve into nearly as heavily is Most Things by Neil Gaiman. If you like fantasy, his writing is really good. I love his books. I think they're very imaginative, really fun and creative. His audiobooks are very good too. He reads a majority of his books himself and is actually quite a good audiobook narrator. It's very fun to hear him read his own work. If I had to pick one, I'd say the one that I don't think gets enough attention for how good it is The Graveyard Book. It's like a juvenile YA novel, a very bleak one though. It starts out with like a double homicide, and I remember reading it when I was a teenager, and I was like, Jesus Christ, this is really dark as an opening, but it's really cool. It's like almost kind of like, it's like a paranormal serial killer kind of story, but it has a main character who's like a fairly young boy, so it's technically a YA juvenile novel with a lot of dark themes in there and some really cool set pieces and moments, good twists and turns and all that. So I'd say that's one, especially if you're a fan of like Coraline, then read The Graveyard Book. You'll probably have a great time with it. I know I did. I think it's fantastic. His other book, American Gods, is also fantastic. Neverwhere is really good. One that's I actually say is another underappreciated one that is not very big. It's a really quick read. Is The Ocean at the End of the Lane. Is another one of his books, and it's a very short, almost like a novella. It's barely even novel length, I think. But another one that's just interesting and imaginative and just really captured my interest going through it the first time. I've reread it since then. I'd also recommend his short story collections. He has several, and especially the audiobooks are very fun to listen to him reading these stories. And they're good little bite-sized bits of creativity and fiction. And he talks a lot about the stories themselves before reading them to give you some context about why he wrote them and what inspired them. So go find his short story collections. Ocean at the End of the Lane and Graveyard Book are great reads. Would highly, highly recommend. One of my all-time favorite authors, even still, is C.S. Lewis. So I'd say there's a lot of work from him that you probably have not read that's really good, because most people go, Chronicles of Narnia, which are great books. I really love them. But I'd say, and it's funny because I'm not religious at all anymore, not in any shape whatsoever. If anything, I'm somewhat anti-religious, just in that I think a lot of institutional religious organizations are a big focal point that causes a lot of bigotry in the country. I think they wield their institutional power a lot of times in a way that is very detrimental to progress and to the well-being of the diverse people and especially the minorities in our culture. And I think they've been wielded that way at every stage of life. It's very rare that religious organizations were on the right side of history, frankly. And I don't know. This is one of those opinions where I'm like, I think it's, if you're a content creator, they tell you to avoid this stuff. I can't. It's just too important to me because I have too many people who are affected by bigotry, too many people who are really dear to me, who I've seen mistreated very heavily because they had family members who were religious and said, well, we can't accept you then. You're not part of this family. because you love this person or because you feel this way. So it's another thing where I don't care whether it's has an effect on whether or not some people won't be able to listen to me because I have outspoken opinions, but I'll be honest, I don't really care because they're real lives at stake. These are not issues that are hypotheticals. They are real. People are affected, and their well-being and their safety is affected by bigotry, and by, the mistreatment of a lot of people, whether it's, LGBT people being affected or minorities, being mistreated on a institutional level. So anyway, sorry, it's kind of a dim prologue, but just to say that, so for that reason, there's very little religious literature that I really find stands up, that I still find is worth reading, that doesn't feel like it's propaganda, that doesn't feel like it's just there to kind of be a what's the word I'm looking for, like an echo chamber to, just it's a book written by Christians or for Christians, or it's just written to reaffirm what you already believe. One author that's very different, though, I think C.S. Lewis was a brilliant nonfiction religious writer who I would still recommend anyone read no matter what you believe. Specifically, I'd say Mere Christianity is a really great book because he writes in a way that it is clearly the work of an intellectual who wants to discuss the interesting ideas of belief, and faith and what it means. The very opening of Mere Christianity has a prologue, or maybe the first chapter, where C.S. Lewis writes in a very friendly way and says, look, this book is not meant to convert you. This book is not meant to convince you of anything. This book is meant to feel like a talk with a friend, It's meant to be like you're sitting at the pub having a conversation about heaven and hell and what it means. And he prefaces a lot of what he says by saying, hey, the stuff I'm talking about here in the long term is not really very important. It's just interesting. These thoughts of logic of what this stuff means and discussions on religion and belief and faith in society, they're just interesting to talk about, and I want to chat about them and write about them and give my thoughts. And it's really engaging. He also has a book called The Screwtape Letters, which is just a wonderful indictment of human nature more than anything. The setup, it's like a satirical bit of fiction where every chapter is a letter written by he basically envisions the devil and his crew of demons as this bureaucratic kind of system. It's not this fantastical evil group. It's a very much like they're like it's almost like they're an agency and their job is temptation and distraction, for humans. So the idea is that all the letters that you're reading as chapters are a head demon writing to his new nephew, who is a junior tempter, who is very amateurish and doesn't know how to distract people and how to make their lives worse. And a lot of the writing is just about how fallible humans are. It's very much not the kind of, it's like, once again, it's a book not meant to indoctrinate you or not meant to tell you it's not fire and brimstone. It's not anything like that. It's a very much a thinking person's point of view on saying, okay, if there was a demon trying to distract you from having a better day or a better life, how easy would that be? He talks about it even. He said, if you want to take a religious person at their having devotion, they're sitting on the pew in church or whatever, and he has a section I remember distinctly where he's giving him advice and says, you don't need to do all this massive work to distract him from the kind of message there or to keep him from being compassionate. All you have to do is tell him that, have him notice something mundane like the person sitting on the pew next to him, their shoes are squeaking kind of loudly. And that's so annoying. And what an annoyance that person is, And just little things like that where you can strip someone's compassion and kindness out, even of the most reverent kind of environments, just by giving them a little bit of bitterness or a little bit of annoyance, and that can totally offset. And I think that still applies to people regardless of any religious context. I see that a lot online where I see people who will be all pro-mental health and all progressive thinking, and then they're asked to be compassionate to like one person on Twitter and they can't do it, and I see that a lot. I see that a lot when I was a quote I saw talking about, people talking about the effects of capitalism, society, and socialism and the structures in our society that cause problems. But they were like, what we see a lot is people who, the whole like hatred of billionaires and all that, which for the record, I get the disdain for saying these people have so much and could do so much and choose not to. But it's interesting to see when you see this discussed with some more nuance and to say, okay, but do you hate rich people and love poor people and wish better for them? Or do you just hate rich people? Because I feel like that's what I see a lot in the internet age, is a lot of bitterness to be like, oh God, a lot of rage against things. But I go, okay, but are you balancing this with compassion to say, okay, but we can counterbalance this disdain for those who are not contributing to society in a way that they could to improve society. But you may not also be either. Obviously, the effects of that are not as wide-reaching. Most of us have a much smaller reach in our platforms, but a lot of us still bring a lot of negativity. We bring a lot of bullshit and pity and negativity to one another's lives. And I'm guilty of this too. It took me a long time to realize that when I thought I was just engaging with someone if they had someone they didn't like or whatever, to just kind of be like, yeah, whatever. They're a piece of shit. Yeah, what a fucking dickhead. And sometimes that's true, since people are being a dickhead. But a lot of times I realized I was like, okay, but that's neither here nor there. It's not making anything better. The same way now I feel that way. It's much more freeing to not feel on edge because someone may not like my content or may not like me for whatever reason. To go, okay, that's they're allowed to. I can be at peace with myself, independent from what I make and independent from what people think. And what I hope is that what I share and my passion for what I do and my compassion that I try to bring to the people I interact with and the way I kind of carry myself in the world brings good into other people's lives. But first and foremost, I have to bring it to myself, and I don't need to bring it down because of some negativity. Again, it's a core tenet in meditation called non-reactivity, which is the idea of, I've had times where I've recorded videos or audios for an hour to only find that they're corrupted or something gets fucked up or something went wrong. And old me would have been like, fuck, it's so fucking unfair and my day's fucking ruined. And instead, it's not that I'm happy about it, but I go, okay, but it's done. It's done, and it's no one's fault. It's no one's deliberate fault. If I forgot to push record or I messed up a setting or whatever, I just go, shit, that's frustrating. But you know what? In times I'll tell myself even, I'll go, hey, I don't need to re-record that right now. I did my work for the day and a mistake happened. And 99% of the time it doesn't. 99% of the time it goes off exactly like it's supposed to, and it's perfectly fine. So why am I going to let this 1% of it ruin my day and fill me with bitterness and sourness that's going to carry through everything else, Instead of going, okay, you know what? I'm going to go, that's my work for the day. I might call it a day then after a stressful moment like that and go, so you know what? I still did my best as I could, despite this mistake. And I deserve to go have a break now and to go have a bite to eat and watch something. And it's all good. It's not a big deal. So anyway, as I say, there's a few books that I think are interesting. Hopefully that'll give you a little bit to start with. I also read a lot of fantasy novels. Some quick mentions are, there's a series called the Stoneheart Trilogy. That's a really cool, it's a fantasy novel, but it's set in a modern day London. That it's like, the idea is that like London has different realms of existence overlapping one another that are kind of affecting one another, which is a very vague description, I know, but it's really good. Go read it. The audiobook especially is fantastic. It's by a narrator called Jim Dale, who's one of my absolute favorite audiobook narrators ever. It just really brings the stories to life. Another book is, I love the Peter and the Starcatchers series, especially the first 3 books. Another one that actually has an audiobook read by that narrator, Jim Dale, who once again just absolutely makes it feel like you're watching a one-person show putting on all the characters. So those are ones, again, I love a lot of YA and juvenile fiction because they're often not as dense as a lot of adult fantasy fiction. It's something very daunting to pick up an adult fantasy book and be like, fuck, this thing's 800 pages and I got shit to do, I don't have time, versus picking up a juvenile fantasy book that still has tons of action and adventure and excitement in it, but it's 250 pages. Or it's, a 3-book series and there's an adult fantasy series that has like 15 books. And I'm like, oh my God, maybe later, older me will have time for that. But right now I just don't. So anyway, all right, let's plow through some more questions. This is gonna be a long one. I can already feel it based on that, but I want to be thorough. I do want to, people who, if you've taken the time to ask these questions, then I'm assuming you want decent answers. And I don't want to feel like I'm trying to give you like the 60-second snippets of my opinions on that. 'Cause I feel like we're so in a shortened attention span so much of the time with that kind of attitude. So, all right, let's see what else. I'll give maybe a few rapid fire ones. Do you believe in love at first sight? Not really. And I don't mean that to sound nihilistic. I believe people can have connections, but I think we treat love as a commodity, like it's this lightning bolt. And I think love is much more special than that because it's not. It's not random, much in the way that a lot of progress and success, kind of true meaningful success in life, is a deliberate effort. Love is, whether it's friendship or relationships or family or whatever, it's a thing that needs to be cultivated, the start of meeting someone, is like it's like the beautiful, amazing, perfect day that you're starting a garden, the flowers maybe are not there yet, but you recognize it's something beautiful. but the love is a seed you're planting to say, you know what, this is going to develop, or it should if it's a relationship that's meaningful and nourishing. And then that's the thing, because you're sharing this nourishing back and forth with the person that you care about, whether it's a friendship or relationship romantically. It's to say, I'm trusting this person to not let this fail if they're not going to put it on me to be watering this seed all the time to make it grow. They're going to want to hold up their end of it and see it flourish because it means as much to them as it does to me. And they don't want to drown it with negativity and selfishness and offloading their problems onto me. Like, it's that back and forth that I think displays what love is on the long term. And I think that's what love really is foundationally. So I think people can have passion, people can have infatuation, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think it's not even necessarily like lesser. It's just, that's what I think the human connection is it's firing all these neurons of attraction and interest. But I think love is something more than that. It's something that requires a tentative kind of hand to be able to cultivate over time. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's what shows what is going to stand the test of time, is when you've done that long enough with someone, again, even if it is just like a long friendship, and you go, man, we're still here after all this time, and now we have such an amazing foundation. Because I have a few of those friends, not many, frankly, at this point in my life. There's not many left, because as life goes on, people branch out, and that's okay. But I have friends now who I might not talk to for a year, and then I'll travel and say, hey, I just realized I'm going to be in your city. We got to grab breakfast. And I'll sit down with them, and within 5 minutes, it's like I saw them yesterday. You know what I mean? Because that nourishing balance was there in the first place. So when you see them again, you go, it's okay. All the roots are still in place. We may not have had a chance to be seeing each other all the time or chat as much and all that, but that's okay. The underlying connection and interest and thoughtfulness is all still there, ready to go and ready to be, kind of enjoyed. So yes, that's kind of my take on that. So that's what I feel at this point in my life, at least. All right, what else do we got? You've talked about your travels and how you love to experience places. Do you have a favorite experience or your destination, and where's the furthest you've been? Furthest I've been is definitely France, by an easy margin. That's like, many, many hundreds of miles further than anywhere else I've been. Not too odd that I went there, though, for a little bit of context. That was for my 18th birthday. My Nana, who lives in the States and has for many years, wanted me to go there because I have relatives who live in France. My family is French. My mom was born in France. So technically like first generation American, which is weird because it doesn't feel that way, because my mom was raised in America for the vast majority of her life. They moved here when she was very, very small. So, but it is just neat to know that she was born in France. And because of that, we still have quite a few relatives there. So there's some deep roots over in France with some family that I love very dearly. I've only gotten to see them in person that one time when I traveled there. And they were extremely hospitable. They had never met me before. They barely knew a thing about me. And I was so worried that they would just kind of feel like, what do I owe this person? I don't know them, and that was me being negative. To the contrary, I went there and met some of my cousins and my aunt and uncle there in France who only speak a little bit of English, and that didn't matter because they were just such kind-hearted people that just getting to be there with them and go out to have a bite to eat, and I got to spend one night at their family home because I was at a hotel for most of it on my own for the vast majority of the trip, just wandering around at the age of 18, not speaking French, which was a little intimidating, but it was a really good experience. I'm so glad I did it. Then I got to spend one night before I went to the airport where they actually picked me up and they brought me back, and I got to stay at their family home and just spend a night with them, having dinner and talking to them. And that's a memory that it might be one of my favorite travel memories ever. And I've been to tons of places with lots of amazing things, but that was such a special experience to be like, these people, have met me, they've known me for basically 2 days in real life, in actual, physical connection, getting to see me in person. And within that 2 days, they made me feel so fucking welcome. And and I will always have such a deep love and care for that part of my family, no matter. And it's one reason why I'd love to be able to have the time and resources to be able to go visit them more frequently as I get older, because I would hate to miss out on that as they get older, So that might be one of my favorite memories. Was they made homemade crepes that was like a family recipe that they literally made on a hot plate in the middle of their dining room table, with me and my couple cousins there, and my uncle and my aunt, my cousins who were right around the same age as me. So, and they speak English a little bit better, but it still was a lot of us trying to figure out what the hell we're trying to say to one another. But then we wouldn't know what to say to each other, but then we'd go, oh, you know what's a song that I love? Have you heard this? And then I remember my cousin putting on a One Direction song, and I was like, oh, of course I've heard this. Of course, you know? Everyone around our age knows this song. And it's just moments like that I look back on and I'm like, I've, that compared to, seeing the Eiffel Tower was awesome, but I did a photo shoot with my cousin in Paris while I was there, because she was wanting to do modeling and different stuff, and just be like, okay, well, I want to do photography. Let's shoot some things, and we'll hang out and we'll grab a bite to eat, and we'll just catch up, and it was just fun getting to meet someone else who's, thousands of miles apart from me. But I was like, oh, you're just another person. You're just another 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old, that's in so many ways so similar to my friends back home, and the way you connect to someone about music and, your life experience is just the same. It just kind of really crosses all cultures and boundaries. So that might be honestly one of my favorite travel experiences. I've gone to a lot of places. I've been to Chicago, I've been to Vancouver, I've been to Victoria in Canada, because Vancouver I was only there for basically just a connecting stop before a flight back home. But Victoria, Canada, I was there for a full day, which was beautiful. I went to New Orleans, been to a lot of places, obviously in California, San Diego, up north a bit, what am I trying to think of? Some of the seaside towns there up kind of in like the middle of California. So I've gotten around quite a bit. Denver, Colorado, been there quite a few times. I've been to Vegas a whole bunch. I really like Vegas. I like it more now because I don't go there. I'm not really a gambling person at all. I'm the type to go, okay, I got $50 that I've budgeted for. I'm going to put them on slot machines, and I know damn well I'm going to lose them. I'm going to go to the cheapest slot machine I can find because I just like cranking the thing and seeing the thing spin and seeing it light up. I don't give a shit if I win. I just want like an hour of fun of me getting to push the button and see it light up at a few different slot machines. And I've done that a bunch, actually, and it's actually been really fun. It's fun going into something like that where I don't have any expectations of making money. I'm like, no, this is just for enjoyment and for me to have a good time. But other than that, I love the nightlife in Vegas. I love the shows, how many concerts and experiences come through there. And the food especially. I'm a huge food person. So the food in Vegas there are other places that are definitely in the same running, but it's up there. Vegas, in terms of the variety and quality, there's a lot of good shit. No matter what kind of cuisine you're into, Vegas is a great destination. So, but yeah, probably that France trip though. That was a very special one. Nothing's ever been quite the experience of that, especially because it was doing a trip like that completely by myself, which I've never had a trip so far and solo like that. So it was a big challenge, but I'm glad that I did it and didn't shy away from it. So, all right, what else we got? Are you a city, country person, or somewhere in between? I'm in between now. So I was raised on a small ranch with some horses for a good chunk of my life, which most of the people growing up didn't realize that. They thought of me as very much like a city person because they knew me from doing theater and, doing, in college classes and stuff like that. But, my kind of true nature growing up was being around horses and doing a lot of, being on a large 5-acre property with no neighbors around, just lots of empty land. So I like a bit of both. I like the convenience. I didn't like having to drive, 40 minutes to get into town to be able to do activities or go take a college class or something. That wasn't great, in my opinion. I didn't particularly enjoy the journey to go somewhere all the time. But I do, it's one reason why no matter where I live, which would probably always be somewhere around Southern California, because I really do love it here. I think people miss out on the beauty of Southern California because they always see Hollywood and downtown, which is like the grimiest, grossest, most cliche part of it. And it has so much else to offer. But anywhere that future me might move to, if I can afford it, if I can make it happen, I always want somewhere that has some amount of land. Even if it's just like a nice backyard and the trade-off is that it's a slightly smaller house, I'd prefer that because I need a little room to breathe. I spent a few years of my life in an apartment and I just felt so claustrophobic, I was spoiled because originally, the first place I moved out to from my parents was a small house with one roommate. And that was nice because that was when it was just like a weird mix of circumstances where the rent was super low. This person, it was just like a private property this guy owned, he didn't own a bunch of houses. This was just one that was like a personal place that he was like, okay, I really want people to live here who are going to take good care of it. And in exchange for that, I'm going to keep the rent really low as long as you keep this place nice. So I got very lucky with that, and then was in an apartment for a little bit, and that felt like such a downgrade. And now I'm at a house with a little bit more room, so I want to maintain that no matter where I go. So I'd always love, or if I am somewhere a little bit more city oriented later in life, I love the idea of like a little vacation home somewhere with a lot of land, like it doesn't need to have a fancy house, but if I could find some vacation property I could afford, older me could get, that was like a nice little cabin or something, but it had lots of beautiful land and just had kind of a lush environment around it, I would adore that. So I don't mind the city, but I need space to breathe. So probably leaning a little more towards the countryside with an appreciation for being near the city. I want to be in driving range of the city. That way I can be there for movies and concerts and experiences, but I don't want to be in the middle of it, if that makes sense. Do you have any cool collections or just in general cool things that you own? I think so. I think I own quite a few cool things. I own a lot of cool books. I own, I've got a few different cameras, obviously, because I, worked as a photographer and a cinematographer. So I like looking back at some of the old cameras I have, because a lot of them get so outdated that selling them is not really a priority because they're not worth very much after the amount of years that I've had them. So one of my favorite collections, because I'm not a big stuff guy, like I have a lot of equipment for like my work, and my creative projects, but I don't like just like stuff that sits on a shelf. I'm not really big on that. I've never really liked it that much as gifts, with some exceptions, obviously. But one thing I have that I have a bunch collected is I love pins. I'm a big pin collector. And it's great because you can collect dozens of them and they're small. You know what I mean? Like I have a little glass display case with them, but I can see it from here while I'm recording. It's in my office. But for example, like some of the pins I have a few pins that are from The Last of Us, the ones that are on Ellie's backpack, her little spaceship, like little space rocket pin is on there, and a couple others. So I have those. I have some from the show Loki, of all things, some specific TVA, which is, like the organization in that show. The band Amberlin, for anyone who knows them, they're one of my top 5 bands of all time. I have pins, these little black and white monochrome pins that are the cover art for all of their albums in pin form. That's a really cool one. I had those on my leather jacket for a long time. I've got the key from Coraline in a pin form. I've got Cala Maria and King Dice from Cuphead. I've got pins of them. I've got Resident Evil Village is one of my favorite video games. So the little crest symbols that represent the 4 like creatures, the 4 like main bad guys in that, and those symbols show up in different parts of the game. I have pins of all 4 of those symbols. I've got a pin of Lady Dimitrescu on there mentioning Resident Evil Village. Also some kind of sultry, kinky pins. Some that are like hands with rope tied around them, or like some are like a corset and thigh high like silhouette design. So I was thinking too, that's one project that might be fun, is to make a little quiet ASMR video going through all my pins. It would be one of those videos that wouldn't be, it's not for the algorithm or anything. It would just be fun to do a little showcase of them and chat about them. You guys could tell me which ones you like the best. So maybe I'll do that at some point when I have time, just for fun, because I think that might be just a fun little side project to do and share. So that's my main collectible that I'm really big on. And then, I buy a lot of books and stuff, but that's less about collecting and more about that I just like books. So why is your voice so fabulous? It was sent from the heavens. What can I say? It's talk about something that I had to not be a narcissist about, just because you can imagine my voice changed when I was like 12 and a half to about where it has stayed, ever since. So I was always that kid in like Sunday or like in youth group, when they were like, can someone read this verse? And I'd be like, I'll read it. Excuse me. From the book of Matthew. Like I was always finding fucking excuses to show off. So a little egoist that I was at the time. So, but I don't know, just fortunate, I guess, just a good little mix of genes, which is funny because, like my relatives, I don't really have many of my relatives who really have kind of voices similar to mine, really. So it's interesting that mine was one of those weird genetic lottery things where my voice just has a different rhythm and tone to it than most of my close family. So for whatever reason. So yeah, that's that. All right. What's some other good ones? Here's an easy one. Chicken nuggets or mac and cheese? Mac and cheese. And no disrespect, I love chicken nuggets, but mac and cheese, that's the way. Especially like a good homemade mac and cheese with some good Cajun seasonings, some good Creole spices in there. I love strong savory food, so that's one of those where getting a southern mac and cheese with like seared or blackened shrimp on the top or crawfish or something, like, oh, mwah. Or like I got a lobster mac and cheese one time in Vegas from some steakhouse there, I forget which one, that was literally like the lobster tail cooked and carved open beautifully and buttered and all that, and like it was like butterflied open, and the mac and cheese was like laid into the lobster tail, so you could take bites of it all together with seasoning on it. Oh my fucking god, that was the best. That was so good. So for that reason, mac and cheese, it's very diverse. There's a lot you can do with it that's really, really tasty. So yeah, all right. This is good. I'm getting through a good amount of the questions now. I won't feel so bad moving on now that I've had, gotten through a few of these. So since you mentioned a few times doing theater, what's your favorite role you've played? Ooh. That's a good one. It's an interesting question because there are some shows where I liked the role that I had, but the show itself wasn't very good. Anyone who's done theater knows what that's like. Sometimes you do a part and you're glad you have the part, but you're like, yeah, this show is kind of not very good, and I'm just, it's one of those, you can kind of feel that in the cast, where you kind of, everyone knows the show didn't come out like it was supposed to, but what are you to do about it? But I'd say, and then sometimes there's the opposite, where the role itself is not that crazy or exciting, but you have a really good experience in the show with your small part. Like I was in a production of Music Man because there's a quartet of singers in the story. So, and they needed a low bass, which is kind of what I was known for in the community theater scene. Because it was funny, because I was like one of the younger members of the theater community, but I was one of the only bass singers, both in the choir and in the theater scene. So that was one where they reached out and they were like, hey, we're having trouble getting people who have the work ethic to do this, because of course it's all a cappella. So they were like, we need people who have a decent ear for this, because you're not going to have any accompaniment whatsoever, and you have like 3 or 4 numbers, and all 4 of you need to sound like right, on the money. Because if you ever listen to a barbershop quartet, if one of them is off, it's like, it's like a trumpet playing the wrong note in a jazz band. Like it's so glaring if it doesn't mesh with what the others are doing together. So that was an interesting one where I stepped in for that in the bass role. And that's one that's a fairly small part, but I had a lot of fun doing it and really enjoyed the challenge of it. And it was fun too, because I wasn't rehearsing really with the rest of the cast, so it was a very different experience from every other show I've done, because the barbershop quartet is only pretty much around for their little numbers. They show up here and there in the story, but you don't really have a lot of scenes with anyone else. So most of the time it was just the 4 of us in the barbershop quartet, going to the vocal director's house and just running the vocals for a while. So, but that was really fun. It was very stressful because it's very comforting to hear the backing track or the orchestra playing, so you have something to sing to, so you kind of know there's a backbone there guiding you. And not having that, doing things fully a cappella, it's a different challenge, but it was a good one. I liked that. I also got to play Antony in a production of Sweeney Todd, and that's like my favorite show of all time. So that's just was exciting. So I'd love to play Antony, at this, earlier in my life, like I did. And then when I get a bit older, I would love to play Sweeney. He's like one of the few roles that's exquisitely perfect for my vocal range, like just to a T exactly my top to bottom kind of range that I can hit very well. And then later in life, I would love to play Judge Turpin, because I could also play that, because he's like a heavy bass role and you just have to be a bit older for it. So those were some fun ones. There's also a show that I did called The Foreigner, which is a very slapstick comedy. That was just a good experience, because it was a good leading role, where the basics of it are that, it's been so long, but I was playing this British character, Charlie, who goes to a cabin to get away for a little bit. He's having like marital problems and a bunch of stuff, and his wife's leaving him, and it's this setup where he's kind of going away to this country estate, and he's terribly nervous, and his buddy's bringing him along. He's like, look, come on, you need a break. You're gonna have a good time here. I just settle in, all right. I've been here before. It's great, And then before he leaves, his buddy to fuck with him because like my character keeps telling him like, oh my God, I'm so nervous. I can't talk to these people. I don't want to, I'm just a ball of nerves. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to talk to anyone. So he kind of goes, okay, fine. So he tells the rest of the household that my character is from some nondescript foreign land and barely speaks a word of English and barely understands anything. But he's a great storyteller otherwise. He's amazing at telling stories with his body only. So there's a lot of really just fun slapstick moments that were really challenging because they're the kind of comedy. There was a part where I have to do a whole fairy tale retelling only with fake words, like made up dialogue that's meant to sound like a generic kind of European fake language, while acting out this whole little fairy tale and trying to get laughs. And it's really nerve-wracking because it's the kind of joke where if the audience is having a good time, they're kind of on board for the silly slapstick, then it goes great. I had a few nights where the audience was right there with me. But if they're not into it, it's so awful because, it's like 2 or 3 minutes of stage time of me just muttering gibberish and doing silly voices. And if the audience isn't laughing, it's just torture. Just halfway through it going, oh my God, can I speed this the fuck up? The audience is tired tonight. They're not in the mood for this goofy shit. So, but that was just a really fun experience. It was a really good director who was an actor I'd worked with before who was directing, who was just a kind-hearted director, really let the cast kind of let their chemistry bring a lot of the comedy out. Got to work with some dear friends of mine in real life who, I hadn't gotten to work with previously. So it was just a very comfortable, familial kind of experience where it was just everyone was really glad to be there. And it's the kind of experience you want as an actor where no one's being selfish. No one's trying to steal the spotlight from anyone else. It's like a really great sports team where everyone's kind of going, okay, this part here, this is my big joke, so I need you guys helping me set this up and selling the joke, and then we're going to do the same for you. When it gets to this one line, we're going to make sure we're building the rhythm of it so when your big moment comes up, it absolutely kills, and there's none of the ego that's like trying to scene steal from one another. Everyone was kind of trying to give this back and forth so everyone had their moments to shine, and that's a really exciting, fun experience as an actor, because the worst is when you're in a show that otherwise is good, but you've got one or two people in the cast who have an ego and they do not want to share the stage with anyone. And they just make it miserable for everyone else because they end up lessening their own work by being over the top or trying to push to get more attention. And they diminish the work of their co-stars by taking away from them. So that was one that was just a really fun experience. So definitely enjoyed that a lot. So, all right. And also because it's not a terribly well-known show. So it was fun to do a show that isn't like crazy popular, but still was very fun material to do. So. All right. Do you feel that you have a healthy relationship with social media? Absolutely not. I'm trying to get better at it, but no, the amount of times I feel so scatterbrained, like it's that thing of like the laptop's on with like half done work and the Netflix is playing and I'm on my phone and there's still music coming out of it. I haven't turned off yet and I'm playing a game on there and it's like my brain, or I'm on Twitter while watching a show. So I've really tried to get better lately about. And part of this meditation has really helped a lot with this kind of mindfulness techniques about being in the moment, about saying, if you're going to watch a show, why watch it? If it truly doesn't interest you and you find yourself so easily distracted, then don't watch it. Don't feel obligated to keep watching it or pretend you like it. But if you find something interesting that's inspiring or engaging to you, really try to settle in and watch. Now, that's not to say you can't have a TV on in the background while you're doing something else. That's not a hard and fast rule. But you know what I mean? Too often, we're constantly trying to do 3 different things at once. And very rarely are we enjoying one thing in a meaningful way. Like, I listened to a course. One thing I like to do to keep myself a little more mentally sharp and also just to vary up my day a little bit with some knowledge is, you've ever heard of the Teaching Company? They have a series called The Great Courses. Basically, they're these these college level courses in either DVD or CD form that cover, they have like, I think they have like 200 or 300 of them covering every discipline you can imagine. They have one on the writings of C.S. Lewis. They have ones on all different eras of history, ones on creativity, on writing, on psychology. So the LA County Library, though, has an app that, with your library card in your account, lets you get access to free ebooks and audiobooks, and that includes a bunch of these courses, which is an amazing advantage. They're usually quite expensive to get otherwise. So I will download these and I'll have them running to help educate myself on different topics. But I had one that was called The Science of Mindfulness that was a clinical psychologist who had done a lot of work with clients over his career, who also had been someone who'd been practicing meditation since he was a teenager for, 50 years at the time of recording the course. So, and just talking about it in a very practical way, not treating meditation and mindfulness as this like pseudo-spiritual kind of mystical thing. He talked about it in a very practical way about centering your focus and how you can use it just to make your days more thoughtful, more productive, less reactive, less influenced by stresses from the outside. And he told one that initially on listening to it, I thought the notion was silly at first. And the more I listened, I was like, this is a good point about how much we lose as we grow older, appreciating things and being in the moment. Because he was talking about, he was talking about different types of meditation. That's not all just sitting and being in your thoughts. That sometimes a meditation can be, he gave the example of food meditation, eating meditation, which I was like, that sounds like some silly mumbo jumbo. But he talked about it and he said, we don't often eat to actually savor the experience and appreciate the simplicity of a piece of good food, to have a piece of fruit or something and enjoy it. Because we've gotten so kind of neutral at the idea of even consuming food as a thing you have to do, or it's not that big a deal, or who gives a shit. And he said, we're trying to get back to a very childlike mindset. He said, you see a little kid who is having a new meal of their favorite food, having chicken nuggets, and he put it down in front of them and they're like, oh, I love chicken nuggets. Oh my gosh. And he said, watch the way they'll eat something, the way they'll sit there and they'll take a bite of it and they'll look at you and they'll say, this is so good. It's so crispy. It's really warm. I really like the way it tastes. I like the way it feels when I take a bite of it. And I like the texture of it, And he said, and it's really a very pure and very positive thing that we lose. So he talked about, he said, it's not a thing to do all the time or to do pretentiously to try to get attention. But he said, just take a moment, He said, sit and have an apple. And he said, just really feel it in your hands for a second, When's the last time you had any food that you thought about the texture of it? Thought about the feel of it when you take a bite, thought about how it affects your palate, what kind of flavors it's really giving you if you let it take a bite and let it sit for just a second before you start chewing, what it smells like, It was really interesting. And I think it seems so silly and arbitrary, but it's like, people will take hours out of our time to try to learn a new skill, or hours potentially to go to the gym and work out, or hours to watch a show. But then we find it bizarre or silly, the idea of taking, 4 minutes to sit there and enjoy a piece of food and just have a still, quiet moment, enjoying something simple and something that's not color and light flashing at us from a giant screen, or our little phone or our headphones blaring to our ears. And again, it's not that any of those things are bad on their own, but they get out of balance, I think, with not having simplicity and quiet in your life. So anyway, that was something that I thought was just really fascinating. I was just like, it was a really good course. I definitely say the app that gives the audiobooks, because I don't know if it's available everywhere. I don't know what library systems work with it, but it's called Libby, Libby. Worth looking into though, because if you have a local library system that is using it, because the library system basically decides what books go into the catalog that you have access to if you have a library card. But check it out. Like I said, I've gotten to enjoy so many audiobooks that otherwise I would not have been able to afford, especially because, again, these great courses, some of them are short, some of them are smaller courses, some of them are literally like 36-hour full college level courses with really amazing professors. I'm going through one right now called Stress and the Body, basically about the effects of stress on aging, on living, on sleep, on development and growth, childhood, and also a lot of it's the negatives, obviously, of it, but also it's kind of promised in later lectures to talk about what adjustments can be made to help to counteract the effects and negative long-term consequences of stress. So I listened to that one. There's ones on creative thinking, ones on creative writing, so philosophy, whatever. So just to say, if you have a chance to access those, or even some local libraries have the physical copies of them, physical CDs that you might be able to go get as well, worth looking into, because I think it's one reason why people talk a lot about why they feel like when they get older, their time moves faster. And I always try to explain to them, that's one of the reasons why I try to always have myself learning something new, is it's not that time is moving faster, it's that your brain is not being given any new stimulation. Like the first little chunks of your life are so monumental. The first time you go on a trip with your parents or your siblings, the first time you stay in a hotel, the first time you go to Disneyland, the first time you remember going to a big movie, the first time you went out with your friends on your own to the mall. Like, you think of how much of your life is first new experiences, these first time moments, and those register in your deep memory. because there are huge spikes in stimulation and learning and experience and emotion. But what happens? You do that for about how long? About to your early 20s, and then you're told, all right, time to settle down. Either, you get a relationship and get a family going or whatever, or if that's not, what you're into, and then at least you got to get a decent, stable job, and you got to stay there for a long time. And people wither away in these environments, and they've studied this. They've studied the psychological effects, and the reason why, especially people who learn and also people who do things like mindfulness and meditation, are sharper in their old age than people who don't, because they're constantly tapping into their mind to try to bring vulnerability and awareness about themselves. And then they're also trying to engage with new experiences and take what their day-to-day experiences are and try to make them fresh again. But I always tell people, that's why if you are constantly trying to read new stories, and again, it doesn't all have to be college learning. It doesn't all have to be as intense as that. But doing something educational, something nonfiction, some sort of learning in that form, especially from a good, thoughtful resource, not from an article on Twitter, that goes into your short-term memory and fires out the back of your head, your memory, as soon as you're done reading it, but actually going through some nonfiction books and courses. And then also just fiction. Good storytelling also is new and exciting. It's the same reason why doing travel is really important. And that can be as simple as you go to a new restaurant in your town that you've never been to, and start doing that every 2 weeks, something like that, to give yourself a new bit of stimulation. And then on the long term, every year, you're trying to make sure and visit somewhere new or plan a big trip for yourself or see a band you never have. These things will make time feel like it slows back down. I fucking guarantee you it will. You will not feel like it's rushing by anymore because you've broken the loop of that same cyclical routine that your brain's going through that's making it stagnate a bit. Just like if you went to the gym and you did one routine, you go and go, okay, I go there and I walk 2 miles on the treadmill. Well, if you do that for 5-10 years, eventually your body will have acclimated to that level of intensity years ago. And if you don't push for more, you're not going to grow past that point. You're going to maintain most likely, but it's not going to make that much of a difference because your body will have plateaued. Our minds are the exact same way, but we usually treat them, we're less aware of the mental degradation that we face as time goes on versus our physical health, which we feel more actively if we gain weight because we're not eating healthy or because we're not exercising as much, so our stamina is lower or whatever it might be, we can feel it more readily in our physical health, but not our mental health. And then we kind of look back and go, why do I feel like fucking shit? Why do I feel like my life's a blur and I have nothing to live for? And you go, well, there's no new inputs into your life. What does your brain have to cling on to? What have you given your brain anything to remember for the last month? Anything of any significance? And again, these don't have to be expensive things. These don't have to be a trip to Europe. They can be a new book. They can be a new board game. They can be a new video game. It's the deliberate choice to say, I'm going to seek out a new experience that I find engaging, that makes me want to think about it, makes me want to talk about it. And that alone will kind of fire some neurons in your brain and keep things fresh. So that's some advice I can give you, especially because I know a lot of my listeners are relatively young. At least I know a fair amount are younger than I am, and I'm only 28. So I'm like, if you can get these habits started this early in your life, you will see really good long-term benefits that will make the rest of your life much better because you're building habits that will carry you through the later parts of your life in terms of the quality, the richness of the way you think about things, the knowledge you have, the creative mindset you have from engaging and consuming good storytelling and good movies, and just kind of giving yourself the freedom to branch out like that and not be worried about. Because again, it's a thing of you watch new movies, and whether it's good or bad, you still want something new. You still give your brain something new to talk about and to think about and to process. Just the same way if you go to a restaurant and it's new and you're trying a new type of food or something, you might love it or hate it. That doesn't matter. You tried something new. And if you hate it, you can think about why. And if you don't like that type of food, or if the restaurant was terrible and you have a story about why they were so dreadful and you'll never go back there again, but you still gave your brain something to latch onto to make a memory out of. And that's so important. So make sure to take time for that and be deliberate about it. Envision yourself doing those things. Don't let it be something to be terribly spontaneous. Try to plan actively to make time for that kind of new engagement for your own sake. I guarantee it will help your quality of life. It has definitely helped mine. All right, let me see if there's any others. It's getting hot and sweaty inside my little recording studio, my little office right here. So I'm not going to record too much more because I'm quite literally dripping sweat because I can't have the AC going while I'm recording because it's too loud. Oh man. Let's see. Do you have any tattoos and do you wish to get more? I do. I only have one tattoo. It's a little aperture symbol. A lot of people think it's from Portal, the video game, because it looks the same. It's not. It's though I love Portal as well. It's just because I'm a photographer and a cinematographer, and I figure I like the little aperture. If you don't know what that is, it's the interior part of a lens that it's like an iris that opens and closes to allow more or less light in through the lens. And I like that because it's not super specific. Like I see a lot of people get like vintage film cameras as tattoos, but I'm like, okay, I'm not a hipster. I don't shoot film. Like I don't, and it's disingenuous to do that. I don't think one's better than the other. I think it's all different. It's different artistic tools. So I like the idea of the aperture though, because I'm like, okay, I'm always using lenses though. No matter what I'm shooting with, film or photography, I'm using lenses and I'm picking lenses to shoot with. So it's a little nod to that. I don't have any more tattoos at the moment. I do have lots of ideas for them. Especially I want what are some of the ones I want? I'd love a Chronicles of Narnia tattoo just because C.S. Lewis is one of my favorite authors. I'd love a little nod to that because he was an early writer who really sparked my imagination very early in life. He also has a science fiction series. Here's a little trivia bit for you. He has a 3-part sci-fi trilogy called I think it's just called the Space Trilogy, I want to say. That it's not the greatest, like you can kind of tell he was just having fun writing it, he just had a good time. But something I like about him as an author is that he didn't limit himself to feeling like he had to write like an intellectual. He let himself branch out into areas of fiction that other men of his stature in that era were not writing, and he just did it because he wanted to experiment. So it's pretty fun. It's pretty interesting, and I'd say worth a read just to hear, to read an author like him trying to do science fiction. It's just fun. So, but I'd love a Chronicles of Narnia tattoo of some kind, maybe like the lamppost that Lucy finds when she first goes through the wardrobe. I'd love a little Nightmares tattoo. Specifically, I love the second game, because I like the second game a little more. I love the idea of because like there's a lot about televisions in Little Nightmares 2, because they're used basically like portals that the main character is going through. So I'd love the idea of having like a little kind of ink sketch looking drawing of a TV, and then in like the center of it, in like the static, is the tall man who's the bad guy, like the silhouette of him in there. And then on the side of it would be Mono, who's the main character with the paper bag over his head, like leaning up against it or like sitting, pressed, like with his back to it or something like that. Like I have some very, very specific ideas for some tattoos I would really like. So I've got like a whole like personal Pinterest board of tattoo ideas I keep saved just for the inevitable future when I will definitely be getting more. So all right, let's see if there's anything else. Yeah, this is pretty good. Again, got through quite a few of these. Any background in film and cinema? Yeah, I've already hinted at it, so that's one. It's kind of, I'll just to say yes. I've done work as a cinematographer. Not really much as an actor in any film. I mostly did work in theater predominantly. But yeah, still working in film. I'm actually trying to get a lot of these audios done and recorded now because I have some film work coming up in the next month. So I'm doing prep for that. So I'm going to be the cinematographer. So I have to plan shot lists and lighting diagrams. I tend to do a lot of pre-production for my work. I don't like leaving stuff to the day. I tend to be very specific. So I make lighting diagrams so that way the crew, I can literally hand them out and say, okay, here's a map of the set, a 2D map of the set with the lighting built into it, on the page. So you can see, okay, there's lights out the windows here, and we're going to use a little bit of haze over by this window to get some light rays coming through. And I need this one over the talent here rigged up and all that kind of stuff. So it's a lot of work before the actual day of shooting to make it work, but it always helps on the day because then there's this nice roadmap to be able to get better shots, because I never like to feel rushed or like I don't know where I'm going on the day in terms of like what to do with a shot or the lighting. So if I have a guideline for it, then I can tweak it on the day to make it better and really refine it. It's funny, it's actually one thing I was thinking, I don't really have the time or resources at this stage to do that, but I've mentioned previously I'd love down the road to do some short films and use my platform as a chance to share some little bit of film work. Either stuff that I've written or maybe, some writers that I know, having some scripts of theirs, I could maybe produce them into little short films might be kind of fun and a good way to give back to some of the community and some of the writers that I've been able to work with, and maybe produce some content that they've written. I don't know, might be a fun idea, but I was thinking too, if I do that, I would love to make behind the scenes for them, because I'd love to make them a little bit of a tutorial for anyone who wants to learn about filmmaking and wants to learn some of these techniques, stuff that I've spent the last 15 years learning ever since I was, as a teenager and a kid, and be able to kind of just accelerate the learning curve a little bit, because a lot of it that it's hard to find info on how to do or know where to start on camera movement and, motivated movement versus unmotivated, and how you pick a lens choice and all of that. So I'd love to be able to use that as an opportunity to give some behind the scenes and kind of showcase some of the learning process behind it. So, because I don't really want to be like a tech YouTuber. I thought about that for a while earlier in life, but I was like, I feel like a lot of the people, like the channels I see about filmmaking, are from people who don't make films. And I don't mean that as an insult. I just mean the whole channel becomes about reviewing new equipment and reviewing new gear and just showing off new pieces of technology. And that's cool and all, but it's not really what I want to do. I would love to show how it's used. I think it doesn't matter that much. It doesn't matter what camera you're using. It doesn't matter terribly much what gear you have, especially because nowadays there's networks like you can rent really good gear for really cheap. There's a what's it called? It's a little resource that I'll shout out here for anyone interested in film. What's it called? All right, I'm doing some Googling. I'm stalling for time right now. I'm vamping while I try to Google what this website is called. That's what it is, ShareGrid. There's a website called ShareGrid that I don't know how many markets it's in as far as how far. I think it's nationwide, but I've obviously there'll be more listings in populated areas than others. But basically, you can rent gear from other people renting out their own personal equipment, cameras, lenses, lighting, dollies, whatever you might need for a shoot, microphones. But usually, compared to renting it from a large rental studio or trying to buy it yourself, it's vastly cheaper. We're talking you can get a whole ready-to-go film kit with a good quality camera and some lenses for really fucking cheap. You can rent it for a weekend to do a little small project and not have to pay. You can pay, you can have a budget of $100 or $200 and go get some lighting rigs and a little camera set from a rental from ShareGrid and make something and just go shoot something. I've done that before when I've shot weddings where I've used it to get additional cameras and extra lenses and stuff like that. So just to say, there's a lot of resources nowadays that have never made it easier. Like it's never been easier in history to make films, to make stories, to shoot things, to be able to let out your creativity. And again, there's always going to be challenges. You're always going to be limited by the budget and resources that you have, but that's a good thing. That's okay. Find small stories to tell. And the biggest thing I'd say is to, learn from no matter what you're making, just learn from it and want to learn from it. Don't be afraid of critiquing your own work, but don't let it turn into self-pity. Critique it with the thing to say, I'm going to tear this apart because I just want it to be better. Not because I'm hating on my own work or I'm loathing what I've made, but because the next time I'm on a set, I'm going to learn from that. I'm going to not make certain mistakes. I'm going to make different, stronger, more interesting choices because I learned from my previous work. So, but that's just, it's a little hint that I highly recommend to try that. And if you're doing creative work like that, do a lot of learning, do a lot of prep. YouTube is your best friend. Now, be discerning. You will get people who will say this is the right way to do things. There will be people who will say things like, this lens, this 50mm lens, it's just not a lens for portraits. It's not done. And anyone who says things in a definite way like that, they're full of shit, and don't listen to them because there's always exceptions to the rules, and it's about learning the rules so you know how to break them, and if you're doing it with a creative intention, you know what I mean? So, but anyway, I'd love to use my channel down the road for that, kind of that 5-10 year plan. I would just hope that I'm doing work that I care about, that I'm passionate about, and getting stuff that I can share with you guys that you'll still be enjoying, still telling stories, no matter what format it might take. But I'd love it as an opportunity to be able to give some learning on storytelling and filmmaking, not because I'm by any means the most qualified person to do it, but just because there's not enough of it, There's a lot of it. There's a lot of good resources, but I think there can always be more and more insight you can give and practical lessons to show people how to make things happen, how to put together a shot list, how to put together a lighting scheme, how to know what even to do, how to deal with color temperatures. And, this is all very technical stuff, but it's stuff that once you learn it, you can use it as a creative tool to make something even more interesting and more special on your own time, if it's what you're into, obviously. I know some people listening, this isn't your field of passion, so this may not be, what you need, but again, if it's not, then find whatever your your passion is and find resources for that. I guarantee you there's some out there. So, but anyway, I'm going to kind of leave it there. That was a good wide-ranging mix of topics and give you a little glimpse at kind of my thoughts and stuff about myself, some books and stuff that I would recommend, a little, kind of a lot about me that hopefully gets to know me a little bit more personally, and a little glimpse at what I think may be in the future for the channel down the road. But again, who knows? That's the thing. All I hope, I don't have any set 10-year goal. My only goal for 5 or 10 years from now is I hope I'm making work that I care about. Whatever that might be, whatever it looks like, I hope I'm doing work that I'm passionate about, that I haven't second-guessed myself into trying to lose who I am to try to meet some trends or anything. I really hope I'm just I think I will. I think, again, I've had a strong game plan from the very start of doing this. And I think that's the thing, is it's going to be very positive going forward, because I love, you all have instilled a level of confidence in me to pursue what creative things interest me. And that's a huge gift. And I'm so thankful for it. How many times I've seen encouragement that's like, hey, I'm just, whatever I see you make in the future, I hope I'm still around seeing you make stuff, hearing that, it's really inspiring. It's really appreciated. I hope whether I remember to say it sometimes or not, do not forget that I do appreciate it, and that it's a really cool feeling to know that I have a platform that allows me to be creative and allows me to feel at ease knowing, what, I might change things in the future. I might take some different courses, but if I do that, I, for the foreseeable future, plan to kind of bring you all along with me for whatever creative endeavors I'm doing, and hope you can get a glimpse of that. Because I've even thought down the road, I'd love to do theater productions, I'd love to have my own little theater company and run little theater shows and all of that, and, I could give behind the scenes on how to stage a production for the first time, just use my platform as a channel to try to not gatekeep breaking into creative industries, if that's why I've always been very open. If I can give insight into voice acting, into photography, filmmaking, or whatever, I will try to do it. I don't always have time, obviously, to help everyone all the time, but when I am able to, I really love sharing information and always want to help as much as I can, So anyway, thanks for being here. This was a long one, but hopefully this gave a lot of good info that, I answered a good mix of questions between this video and part 1 that will actually be satisfying for you to enjoy. And I don't know. Well, I'm sure we'll do another one of these again soon, maybe for 10,000. You can start thinking of some questions. We'll probably be there for 10,000 subscribers much sooner than I would have thought at the rate things are going, which I'm very appreciative for. But it's a little wild. It's a little strange seeing the numbers tick up at such a rapid pace. So, I don't know. What am I saying? I got to get out of here. I got work to do. I got more editing to do. There's audios to be made. There's gameplay to be recorded. And there's, and of course, don't worry, I'm taking, time for myself as well. There's also naps to be had. So make sure you're doing the same, because you can't be good for yourself or anyone else or your passions or your dreams unless you're giving yourself the kind of love emotionally and physically that you need, and the rest and kind of, the restorative time that you need to be able to be the person you want to in the long term. All right. Don't get into that grind mindset where it's like, I don't need sleep, I need success. It's like, nope. Life is longer than you think it is. You have more time. You are better off chipping away at it a little at a time, day to day, while giving yourself love and rest and compassion and positivity, than trying to burn yourself out, pushing yourself day after day, only to find yourself kind of falling off an emotional cliff a few months from now. So just to say, give yourself that time too. I'm trying to make sure and, take a dose of my own medicine and do that. So with that said, I'm going to go take a break now. I'm going to go relax for a bit. We watch something, we have a bite to eat, and I'm going to enjoy the rest of my day. No matter what happens, we're going to make the most of it, Remember, that's up to you. You can't always decide what the day brings, but you can decide how you react to it and how you decide to move through it. So, and I have faith you're going to do a good job doing it. I swear. It may not be easy, it may be uncomfortable, but there's better things on the other side of your hard work and you making the difficult choices now for the future you to be happier and more stable and more emotionally safe and in a better place. You can do it, all right? We all can. There's room for us all to do better and to feel better and to be the people that we want to be down the road. Just don't set a time limit on it. It might take time, and that's okay. So, all right. Take care, everyone. I'll see you at the next one of these, and you'll hear me in the meantime on whatever I'm posting. So don't worry. We'll be back chatting soon. In the meantime, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and I'll talk to you later. All right. Bye.